Hey everyone, Coach Kirsten here, and I just got back from doing the inaugural 70.3 in New Mexico in Ruidoso. And I had a lot of people ask about the actual course and the town and what it was like and if I would recommend it. So I wanted to share a little bit about the logistics of my experience. And right off the bat, if you don't want to listen to a long video, then 100% I would recommend this race. I think it was amazing. It was gorgeous. It was challenging. It was put on really well. The logistics for a very small area were worked out really well. So I loved it. If it wasn't in the middle of the summer, I would actually make it my annual race and do it every single year. But I run a summer swim team, and this was a big challenge for me to even get there in the middle of our swim season. So with that being said, the course is situated in Ruidoso, New Mexico. Ruidoso, I might be saying that totally wrong. I'm so sorry if I am. And it's a smallish mountain town, about 7,000 people live there, and it's at about 7,000 feet in elevation. So if you're coming from sea level, make sure you do some training to prepare for that. I saw a lot of people in the swim having a tough time with the breathing because of the elevation. So remember, 7,000 feet of elevation, if you're not used to that, is going to feel different on your body than sea level. I drove from Colorado. It was about an 8-hour drive. It was a really easy drive. It was a very hot drive. So I actually rented a car because my car's air conditioning was not working at the time. I didn't have enough time to get it fixed. And it was a great drive. I just went by myself and I brought everything with me. I like driving to races, so I can bring everything with me. And about 8 hours from Colorado. So that's a perfect distance for me to do a race. I drove on Thursday. I got there Thursday afternoon. The race is Sunday, so I had plenty of time to check everything out. When I got there, I checked into my campground. So I camped. I stayed at a campground. There are lots and lots and lots of campgrounds. So if you guys like camping, if you have an RV, there's cabins, so many cabins. I actually stayed in a teepee. It was really, really cute. It was a little warm. And I did see plenty of hotels. I think I initially thought there wouldn't be a lot of places to stay because it is such a small town, but everyone I talked to easily found a place to stay. There's lots of options, and they're all really close by, like within a couple miles. I think my campground was 1.5 miles from the start and 2 miles from the finish. So a little warmer. I thought it was going to be cooler because it's at 7,000 feet, but it was in the 90s the whole week. The whole time I was there. So be prepared for that because the website said like 70s. So I don't know if this was just a hotter year and normally it's in the 70s, but the inaugural year, it was very warm. Let's see. So the first thing I did was I went and checked out the lake, and it's up a big hill. It's a pretty small lake. It was a 2-loop course, and I was wondering how they were going to do transition because the only parking up by the lake is up the parking lot, and it's a dirt parking lot, and it probably would hold like 20 or 30 cars. So I was very interested. I got there before they started setting up transition. But it ended up being the parking lot was transition and nobody could drive up there. So everyone was shuttled in. They actually didn't allow spectators during the swim because there was no place for spectators to even be, because everything was so small and compact that it was only enough room for the racers. There was a sprint and Olympic distance the day before, which was really good because I don't see how Ironman can expand the field much bigger than it was. I think ended up being about 800 people. Maybe they might be able to fit 1,000, but not many more. So it would be a race that they couldn't really expand the number of entries. But since they had a sprint and Olympic the day before, that might be enough to have it be a worthwhile place for them as a business to make money, which I hope it is because it was a really neat race and a really neat location. There happened to be, I was also wondering about food because I bring all my own food, but there's a couple things I wanted to get. And in small towns, sometimes there's not a lot of options. But there's lots of places for food. There's an Albertsons there. There was a Natural Grocers. There just happened to be a little a little food mart right next to my campground. So I just walked over there, and it was really extensive. It had everything I needed, and everything is really cheap there. So compared to where I live in Colorado, I got almond milk, waters, bananas. I got a big bunch of bananas, a big thing of almond milk, and 4 bottles of water, and it was $6. I was like, are you sure you got everything? Because I feel like where I live, that would have been $12 easily. So as far as amenities, that it seemed really able to accommodate everybody that came in for the weekend. So Expo, it was really neat. It was at a school and like a park. There was a big like park next to this school. So the Expo was fine. It was really easy to get to. There was parking. You just park at the school and walk over. And there were wild horses everywhere. So the day that we went to go pick up our packets, there's just wild horses like hanging out, nibbling on the grass right on the run course. And it was gorgeous. It was really pretty. It's a mountain town. So logistically, picking up my packet was really easy, plenty of parking. I've been to races where just to get to packet pickup, you have to park in a parking garage. And this was just so much easier because everything was really close. And it's more like a small town race, a small race feel instead of like a big Ironman race. So I really, really liked that part. All of that was really simple. And race day, and then bike drop off. So it's 2 different transitions. So you have to drop your bike off and bike gear off at the lake, and then your run gear at the finish, or at the second transition. And the finish was actually in a different place, but the second transition and the finish were really close by. So what they had to do, because nobody could drive up to drop off your bike because there was no parking, because the parking lot was being used as transition. And they're just like windy mountainous roads. They're really narrow. So we bussed up our bike. So I'd never done that before. And what they did was they just put each person's bike in one side of the bus on a seat, and then you sit across from it and hold it in because, it's bumpy and windy and your bike flies out. So it was a pretty simple process. I maybe had to wait in line for like 45 minutes because you could only get so many bikes and people in at a time, however many rows of seats there are. But it worked out really well. We took our bikes up. The bus dropped us off. You have to walk up this big hill with your bike. It's the same hill that you have to run down with your bike out of transition before you mount your bike. So dropped off the bike. That was really easy. And then dropping off our run stuff was easy. And then you can kind of walk around and see where the finish was compared to transition. So after the race, you know where to go. And again, so there's 3 different places, but it wasn't, it wasn't as confusing. I thought it was going to be a lot more logistically confusing than it was. Even listening to the race, where they talk about the race, I forgot the athlete briefing. Even listening to that, I was kind of confused of how everything was going to go. But when it actually happened, it was a lot more simple. It just sounds really complicated. And I don't like complicated. I don't like stressful couple days leading up to the race. So this actually it was not stressful at all. They had it for a first time race. They had it dialed in. So that was the day before you have to drop off all your stuff. So race morning, you park at the civic center, or the convention center. Sorry, I should have written this down. The convention center, you park and then take the shuttle bus up to the start. And that was really easy. I didn't have to wait in line at all after I parked. The buses start going at 4:15 in the morning. And it's only about a 15-minute drive because it's only a mile and a half. But it is up windier roads, and the buses are coming up and coming down to get more athletes. So they didn't allow any spectators on the bus, which helped because then the athletes could get there more quickly. The only thing that was a little challenging was there's not really, like if you're someone who warms up before a race, like a dry land warm up where you like jog around, there wasn't really anywhere to do that. You could like jog up and down the hill for that comes out of transition, but then you're like working a little too hard. So as far as bathrooms were all good. Like I feel like logistically they had everything dialed in. Swim start, it was rolling start. So just like most of the Ironman 70.3 races that are currently going. So you line up according to your projected swim time. The swim I was very confused about in the athlete briefing, but it actually made sense once I got there. And I figured it all out the day before when I dropped off my bike. They were, it was every 3 seconds, 2 people were jumping off the dock. So you jump in and then start swimming. So it's 2 athletes every 3 seconds. And since there's only 800 people in the race, I don't think it took as long as most races take. But a lot of the Ironman races have 3 to 5 people every 3 to 5 seconds. So I think it took about the same amount of time as any other race. And you swim out to a buoy. And then you swim like a rectangle out, and then you come all the way back to the first buoy. So not back to the start, because the start you kind of swim out to the first buoy. You come all the way back to the first buoy, it's a rectangle, and then the second loop, you go out, make most of the rectangle, but halfway through the way back, there's these pylons, I think they were called. I didn't know what that was, so the race briefing, I'm like, I don't know what that is. They were 2 like long tubey buoys. You swim in between those to the finish. So it's like 1 3/4 laps of the swim. And again, I thought it was going to be so complicated and I couldn't figure it out. But when I was in it, it was very, very simple. It was a little challenging if you're a faster swimmer. When you come around the first lap, the end swimmers are still entering the water. So then it's a big hodgepodge of kind of moving around people. But if you're a faster swimmer, you're kind of used to doing that anyway, especially if you do races with age group waves where you're kind of navigating that. So that was a little cloggy. And that's when I noticed all the people doing breaststroke and like, they couldn't breathe. There were 3 to 4 people hanging on every buoy. Each paddleboarder, kayaker had 2 to 3 swimmers on them. That's how I knew. And I talked to somebody who had a tough time with the swim because of the elevation, because it starts over 7,000 feet. So again, if you are planning on doing this race and you come from a low elevation, make sure you do some stuff to prepare for that. So you run out of the swim, it's up a big hill, you run up these wooden stairs, go through transition, grab your bike, and then out of transition, you go down this pretty big hill. So it was a little like with your bike shoes, you just have to be careful. You don't get too much speed. And I was kind of like holding my bike back a little bit. And the dismount line is at the bottom of the mount line is at the bottom of that hill. So that was, again, something that the day before, I'm like, wow, this is a really steep hill. Race day, it was a little steep, but it didn't feel as bad as I expected because you're in race mode, your kind of adrenaline's going. But it was pretty steep and I did have to watch my footing. Got on the bike. The first 4 miles are downhill. It's really gorgeous, like lined with trees. It's really pretty. You have to be a little careful. It is windy. So just watch your downhill speed. There's a couple sharp turns for about 4 miles. And then you get out on the highway. I think it's a highway. It's the main road. It's really smooth. It's really, they had a whole lane for bikers, like a whole section. So I never felt unsafe with the cars. And you went out along this road about 14 miles and it was all gradually downhill. Then you turn around and come back up that hill, gradually uphill for 14 miles. If you've done Arizona, it's similar to that. It's like you go out and it's gradual downhill, you come up, it's gradual uphill, but it's nothing, there's not like big climbs during this portion or big descents. And then you do that again. So you do that twice. So it's 14 miles, turn around, come back up for 14 miles, turn around, 14 miles down, 14 miles up. And then you turn onto a different way to get to the second transition. And it's about 4 miles of pretty steep climbing. So it reminded me of St. George, kind of that. Not as big as the last part of Snow Canyon, but like the first few miles of Snow Canyon. That's what it's like. So I was out of the saddle a couple times, and then you go up to the run transition. Coming out of run transition, the second transition, you head out onto a bike path, and almost the entire run is on this bike path. It's 3 loops, which again, when you hear that in like the athlete briefing, you're like, how am I going to keep track of my loops? Like what? Like this is 3 loops is a lot, but you know, they have the mile markers. It makes sense. You're going to know if you're on mile 3.5 or mile 7.5, hopefully. They had aid stations every mile at least. Since it's 3 loops, I felt like there's even a few more aid stations. It's a lot of, it's on a golf course. So it's, you know, some ups and downs, just like you would expect on a golf course. And then there's one pretty big climb that you go up and turn around and come down 3 times because it's 3 loops. And so it does get progressively more challenging as you get fatigued, but it starts at the same place it ends. So everything that goes up also comes down. So I would say for the overall difficulty of the race is very comparable to St. George, 70.3 if you had ever done that one. And my time was the exact same time as I got 2 years ago last year when I did St. George, the last year of it. My time was exactly the same. So I think overall the courses are very, very similar in difficulty. So if you want something to compare it to, like if you're looking to set a time goal and you've done St. George, it's very similar to that. What I was surprised about, the water temperature, it was really warm. It was like 60, it was like, I think almost 70 degrees. And so I didn't wear a wetsuit. I wore my floaty pants because that's too hot for me in a wetsuit, but it was wetsuit legal. And then the air temperature was very warm. In the morning, it was, I think, around 70. And then by the afternoon, it got up to the high 80s, low 90s. And I was surprised about that because I'd never been there, but on the website, it said average temperatures this time of year in the 70s. So maybe we just had a really hot year, but I would go in expecting some hotter temperatures. But other than that, that's kind of a preview of the course. If you have specific questions, let me know. I would love to answer any questions. I also have some really good tips on how to, if you live at low elevation, how to get some higher heart rate training in the pool and in general, so that the elevation isn't as much of a factor. So hit me up for those. Maybe I'll make a video of that next time I have some time. So let me know what you think. Again, if this was not, the race was July 12th. If it was not in the middle of the summer, this would be on my schedule every single year. I loved it that much. And it was enough of a challenge that it would want to keep me coming back, trying to get better at it. And it was gorgeous. And the volunteers were amazing. The New Mexico community really came out and helped us have a really great race day. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Hope to hear from you guys how you love the course, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.